r/AskReddit by Redmond Dts. What's your worst experience in a hospital? Being born. My man. 10 years old having to say goodbye to my mother as she was dying from cancer. When I was a kid, my dad had epilepsy pretty bad. It had hit him out of nowhere for no reason. Sometimes just sitting on the couch. Sometimes when he'd be driving and I'd have to grab the wheel to keep us on the road. When he finally got into Emory to have his brain surgery, he had to be taken off his meds so the doctors could get a full scope of how bad his seizures were, which were full-on grand mal seizures. So at 13, maybe 14, I can't quite remember now, I had to take time off from school to take over for my stepmother, sit in the hospital room with my dad 24/7, and press a button anytime he had a seizure. Those were some of the worst days of my childhood that I try to repress but haunt me forever. In the long run though, my dad had a tumor removed from his right hemisphere, made a complete recovery, and only ever had less than a handful of seizures since. The guy who slept with my first wife was a doctor at our regional hospital. When I found out about the affair, I confronted him in the lobby of the hospital while very drunk. A brawl broke out, and because of both my intoxication and his superior physical fitness, he beat the snot out of me. I spent the next 24 hours in the same hospital and he took excellent care of me. I left him 5 stars on Google reviews because he's actually a great doctor. I hated the whole experience. I woke up during surgery. They were inside my left lung doing some stuff, and then I suddenly woke up in a panicked way, breathing air through my open cavity in my chest. Sat up in the bed, and then they pushed me down and filled me up again with the stuff that makes you go back to sleep. Becoming a widow on our 5-year anniversary. Working in one, registered nurse. Patients can be mean, family members can be mean, doctors can be mean. They give me 6 patients and then expect me to spend a lot of time with each. I have 10 minutes per hour with each, and if I have to cover for someone else I have 12, meaning 5 minutes with each per hour. People that are admitted are really sick and deserve more care. But I'm just the hired gun, and it's not my fault that they think nurses can give 6 patients 30 minutes of care each in an hour. Going to private rooms makes it harder since you can no longer take care of 2 on same stop. Seeing the bill. Woke up during or right after surgery and couldn't move or breathe, but could hear the nurses chatting next to me. I was desperate to tell them I was suffocating, but I was paralyzed and couldn't even open my eyes or twitch a finger. I guess I eventually passed out, and am still traumatized by the experience years later. My dad went in for knee surgery, woke up to watch the towers fall. He thought he was hallucinating. For me, 2 years ago I had a total hysterectomy. 30 days later I was back in the ER with appendicitis. They wheeled me into a room after surgery and asked if I thought I could get up and take a step to the bed myself. I said I thought I could. So I stood up and all this blood splashed on the floor. I got into the bed, with the nurses speaking softly and saying everything was fine, not to worry, it was a routine appendectomy, but they couldn't get the bleeding to stop. The surgeon came in and demanded to know what I did, because people don't just bleed like that. He brought the OR team into my room and redid all the incisions with me awake and watching. Still couldn't get the bleeding to stop. Ended up going home with a wound pump suctioned onto my belly to keep it from getting infected. Then I had an allergic reaction to the adhesive holding the pump in place, had to remove it myself. My belly looked like it was covered in 3rd-degree burns. Ended up with a surgical infection anyway. I went in for my checkup with my hysterectomy surgeon, told him everything that had happened. Because of how the time worked out, I was also supposed to see that terrible surgeon later that day to get my stitches out from the appendectomy, and I was terrified. He walked out of the room for a few minutes, came back in and said he'd filed a complaint against that other doctor and was taking over my care. I cried. He got me taken care of quickly. Edit. I'm in hospital. 5 AM, a very old man waking me up, trying desperately, telling me that there is a pool of blood beneath my bed and I was struggle to wake up. Eventually I was looking down my bed and I saw like a 2 pints of my blood, so I started screaming to the nurse and that's about it. My IV just torn off my arm while I was asleep. Dream guy or real guy? Real. The $75,000 bill afterwards. Yes, I live in the United States. Had no health insurance at the time. My appendix burst and I went almost 3 days until I went to hospital. I thought I was just super sick and yes, I was worried about money. After surgery and 7 days in hospital. Then a few weeks later I started getting my bills in the mail. Totaling almost 80 grand. This was 3 years ago. I paid $50 a month. At least I tried. That wasn't good enough, so they went in collections. And I went from having great credit to bad. Damn. That's fouled up. That's the only reason why I'm happy that I live in Norway. Are you sure that's the only reason? That time I was in a psych ward. I was going through some extreme emotions while suicidal. Nobody wanted to help. Because of the suicidal thoughts, they eventually had me voluntarily committed. At one of the worst emotional times of my life, they took away my freedom, my clothes, and my access to the outside world. Everyone in there was jaded and hostile except my medical doctor and a chaplain. They don't treat you there, they just keep you from killing yourself. If I'm ever suicidal enough to get hospitalized again, I will not make the mistake of telling anyone. Long story short, got an asthma fit, bad flu case complication, progressively worsening. I felt that my breathing gets more and more difficult. It was like having a really tight turtleneck that is getting smaller and smaller. Came to hospital quickly by my car and explained my problem to the lady at the acceptance desk with remaining breath. She just told me to go somewhere, never was at this hospital before, and even though I wheezed to her that I feel really sick, she completely ignored me. Went inside and found some free bed where I lied wheezing and coughing for about an hour, consistently being ignored all the time. After I got better I stood up, sent the lady at the desk that could not care less to hell, got into the car and went home. I have multiple experiences. 1. Waking up and finding out I'm in the hospital because of seizures. Happened many times. 2. Finding out I had a brain tumor. 3. Having 3 brain surgeries. Not a huge fan of hospitals, but very thankful for them. Waiting for 6 hours with my leg in pieces for the specialist to be airlifted from a ski area to the hospital. Random bike racer with a broken collarbone holding my hand. Being 11. Then 9 hours of surgery and learning to walk again, only to be brutally beaten up first day of school and then punching the leg that was operated on. Screw the 1980s. I'm okay now. Can't feel half my thigh but everything else is okay. Waking up from surgery and they hit me with some morphine. I bazooka baffed on the poor nurse. Boulder Community Hospital saved my life. Waiting 4 hours with my grandma who fell and cracked her head on the concrete, only for them to finally show up and just staple her head. We could hear them in the hallway talking about food for an hour. My only hospital stays have either been in the ER or the psych ward. Oh boy, I sure have some stories. Being hospitalized completely by force with zero choice is never fun, but some of those nurses were goddamn awful. The adult ward is much better, but being a 14-year-old in the youth ward was a terrible experience. It truly didn't help me at all. The adult ward did help and I am still pro psych ward, just not pro crappy nurses that tell sick kids that they're bad kids. Went to hospital with intense abdominal pain. Got there and apparently a child had been killed in a drive-by, and the parents were outside the waiting room wailing and crying. Then I heard a couple of guys behind me that sounded like they were planning some sort of revenge. I was in a mental hospital and my favorite nurse got bit by this effing butthole neighbor of mine that wouldn't stop screaming. I saw a 10-year-old girl who was dying from cancer sleeping on her bed. Her parents and little brother were waiting outside. I had to give them the bad news. After I gave them the news, this is what happened. Parents, crying. Boy, why are you guys crying? Dad, your sister will be going to the stars, honey. Boy, oh really? I also want to go to the stars. Mom, you can't go to the stars, sweetie, not now. Then I'll become an astronaut. He didn't know how to pronounce it, and visit her in the stars. That's all folks. Thanks for watching. Have a nice evening. Kitos.